Resuming debate, reprise du débat, the honourable member for West Vancouver-Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's an honour to rise in the House today to join the debate on the Fall Economic Statement, otherwise known as the FES. This year, the FES comes at a very difficult time as the world suffering from inflation caused in large part by Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine, which has reduced the supply of oil and gas in the market and boosted the prices of energy and all the other goods and services that we buy. Similarly, the reduction in grain in the market from Ukraine and the many droughts and climate disasters has inflated the price of food. To cope with inflation, we've seen the Bank of Canada and central banks right around the world raise interest rates to cool an overheated economy. The result is that even Canadians that I know with secure, well-paying jobs are worried about balancing the rising cost of everything that they buy with a mortgage, and especially those that have a variable mortgage. But it's even more crushing for those that don't have this security. And that's why we passed legislation to double the GST credit for 6 months, which will provide $467 for families, an extra $500 rent support for low-income renters, and launched a dental care program for low-income families, starting with children under 12. And this, of course, builds on programs that we've brought in since 2015, like Boost to OAS and GIS for seniors, the Canada Child Benefit, $10 a day childcare, all of which have lifted over 3 million Canadians out of poverty and brought Canada to its lowest ever poverty rate. We believe that our approach shows compassion for those that really need the support, while being cautious not to make inflation worse with further spending. With this in mind, enter the FES. The FES is meant to provide an update on the state of the finances of the government, to introduce limited new measures, while signaling where the government intends to go with the next year's budget. This is exactly what the FES does this year, providing important support for young Canadians, low-income workers, small businesses, while showing how Canada is going to compete in the global race for investment and jobs in the low-carbon economy. The next year will be really challenging worldwide, but there is no country in the world that is better positioned to thrive going forward than Canada. And the measures in the FES will move us closer to that reality. Mr. Speaker, we know that our country and our economy cannot thrive if we leave students stuck with crippling and ever-increasing debt. Over the last 7 years, we've doubled Canada's student grants to help students pay for post-secondary education and made it so students don't have to start repaying their student loans until they are making at least $40,000 a year. And during the pandemic, we also suspended interest on student loans. And now, through the Fall Economic Statement, we're permanently eliminating the interest, the federal interest on student loans. In Budget 2021, we increased the Canada Workers Benefit to provide up to $2,500 more in the pockets of families who need it most. And given the high cost of living today, putting a real strain on people's day-to-day lives, we're moving payments to be quarterly based on last year's income so that they have that support now when they really need it. And throughout the pandemic, the Government of Canada was there to support small businesses with wage and rent support and access to liquidity. And this meant that businesses survived the pandemic and provided the foundation for recovery, where Canada has recovered 117% of the jobs that were there pre-pandemic. Canadians are increasingly moving away from using cash to pay for goods and services in favor of credit cards. This is something that very much happened over the course of the pandemic. But in doing so, they are subject to credit card swipe fees, which are impacting businesses, particularly small businesses. And small businesses don't want to pass this cost along to customers, especially at this time. So to help these businesses and lower the cost of goods for all Canadians, we're proposing legislation to ensure that credit card companies reduce swipe fees. And we know that the elevated cost of housing is impacting all Canadians. As I mentioned, we're providing a $500 top-up to the Canada Housing Benefit. And to tackle speculation in the market, beginning next year, we're going to be bringing in a 2-year ban on foreign buying of real estate, including a 1% tax on non-resident owned unused housing. And as of May, we're also taxing property assignments. In the FES, we're going to be helping first-time homebuyers get into the market with a tax-free home savings account of up to $40,000, details of which are forthcoming, as well as the first-time homebuyers tax credit. At the same time, we're providing a new tax credit for owners that build a secondary suite for senior family members or those living with a disability, as well as bringing in a new tax on property flipping. The aforementioned measures will help all Canadians right now, but we know that the world is not static. While the war in Ukraine has not only caused inflation and a short-term hike in the demand for fossil fuels, it's also accelerated the transition to cleaner energy as nations seek to end their dependence on fossil fuels, to have energy security, as well as to tackle climate change. And nowhere is this inevitability of the transition away from fossil fuels more obvious than what's happening south of the border with the Inflation Reduction Act. And this act is aptly named because, contrary to what the leader of the official opposition believes, you don't opt out of inflation by investing in crypto, which of course has crashed by 61% this year. You opt out of inflation by reducing reliance on the roller coaster of fossil fuel prices. And the IRA offers enormous financial supports for firms that locate their production in the United States, creates generous tax credits to industries like renewable energy development, hydrogen production, and incentives for North American made electric vehicles to power the transition. While on a per capita basis, the U.S. investment of almost $370 billion pales in comparison to the per capita $100 billion investment that we've made in Canada. Canada needs to respond to secure its competitive advantage and to secure investment and jobs or risk being left behind. On the fight against climate change alone and to build a net zero economy by 2050, Canada will need to invest between 125 and 140 billion every year over that period. And total annual investment in the climate transition to date is about 15 to 25 billion. And so no government can close this gap alone. We need to mobilize private capital to invest in Canada's green transition and the clean economy. And while companies and investors are aware of opportunities to commercialize and deploy emissions reductions technologies, they're often restrained due to investment risks that are frequently associated with these investment opportunities. And that's why through the FES, we're launching the Canada Growth Fund, which is a $15 billion facility which will help attract billions of dollars in new private capital to create good-paying jobs and to support Canada's economic transformation towards a low-carbon future. The fund will aim to leverage private capital at a rate of at least 3 to 1 and respond to measures the international competitors are bringing in. And to supplement the Canada Growth Fund, the FES also proposes a refundable tax credit equal to 30% of the capital cost of investments in renewable energy, electricity storage, heat pumps, zero-emissions vehicles, refueling equipment, and more. And this will greatly assist with the electrification of our economy that we will need to do to reduce our emissions. But there are parts of our economy that cannot be practically electrified. And that's where solutions like hydrogen become key, such as in freight transportation, air travel, and shipping. To support the growth of this sector, the FES also announced that we'll be introducing an investment tax credit for clean hydrogen to ensure this critical clean energy source is developed here in Canada. What is notable about all these measures is that we've geared the full extent of the tax credit only to those companies if they follow proper labor practices and create well-paying jobs. This is very key. But to ensure that the workers are ready for these jobs, the FES will also proceed with a $250 million investment to create the Sustainable Jobs Training Centre to help 1,500 workers upgrade or gain new skills for jobs in the low-carbon economy, and a union training and innovation program to support 20,000 union-based apprenticeship opportunities to training in the skilled trades. So, Mr. Speaker, I do see that my time is running out, which means I won't be able to discuss things like the additional $1.6 billion that will go towards delivering on our immigration levels plan, the new tax that we're going to be bringing in on share buybacks to ensure that corporations, many of which are making record profits this year, invest in Canada rather than simply buying back their shares. But I'll say that the FES shows that we're taking both a responsible fiscal path and are also being compassionate to those that are most impacted by inflation through supports for students, low-income workers, and small businesses. But importantly, it also allows Canada to be competitive in the race for investment in the green economy that will provide long-term prosperity and jobs for our country. And while we're navigating turbulent times at the moment, there is no country that is better positioned to thrive over time. And that's why I encourage all members of this House to support this legislation. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député.
The Honourable Member for Rimouski, Nejet, Témiscouata, Lebasque. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I listened closely to my colleague's speech, and, well, he talked about a lot of things, but he forgot a few major points. And the things that he forgot to mention, Mr. Speaker, are seniors, people who are vulnerable in our society. And we don't understand why. Once again, you know, I'm going to ask a question on this subject, but why is it that the Liberal government continues to discriminate against seniors? They did it in 2021 when they created, as if by magic, the $500 check for people who are 75 years old or over. And these are the magicians who can't get people's passports to them, but they can send checks out, the day before the election or the day when the election was called. And here we're seeing old age security going up at 75, so they're creating two classes of seniors. You're eligible for OAS at 65, but the supplement is only for those who are 75 and older. So my question for my colleague is, how is it that this government continues to discriminate against seniors? And again, in this economic update, we're facing the worst crisis in years. And here, once again, they have absolutely nothing for the most vulnerable in our society. They have to turn to food banks. Demand in my riding is going up constantly, Mr. Speaker. People have to make terrible choices between food and medication, for example. So when, Mr. Speaker, will this government act for seniors? The Honourable Member for West Vancouver-Sunshine, Coast to Sky Country. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to thank my honourable colleague from Quebec for his question. But I disagree with him and the premise of his question. We've always been there, and we are there for seniors. And as I said in my speech, we improved OAS and the GIS for seniors, and the measures that we have introduced this fall, like the $500 in help for renters, that's going to help seniors. There's also the GST credit. That's something else that is going to be available to people of all ages. But I know that there are a lot of vulnerable seniors who are going to be able to access that. So I disagree with the premise of his question. We're always there for seniors and for all Canadians, and we will always find new ways to improve their lives, and I'm always available to work with my honourable colleague to achieve that.
Commentaire, questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Perth Wellington.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the member from West Vancouver-Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country for his comments. But I think one of the issues we keep seeing time and time again, we're talking about the cost of living increases that Canadians are being faced with time and time again, is what the government can actually do to help those Canadians right now. And one of the things that we've heard time and time again is about the tripling of the carbon tax, the impact that it's going to have on home heating, on gas, on groceries. And wouldn't the member agree that all Canadians can be helped right now and give some assurance that the government will just stop and cancel that increase on the carbon tax?
Honourable Member for West Vancouver-Sunshine Coast, Sea to Sky Country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague from Perth Wellington for the question. This isn't a measure that actually makes life more expensive for Canadians, because we know with the climate action incentive that 8 out of 10 families actually get more than they pay into this. In my own province of British Columbia, this has been something that's been in effect for over a decade, actually brought in by a right-of-centre government at the time. So I completely disagree with that as an affordability measure. I think the last thing we want to do is be cutting off the checks that people are receiving. When we're talking about the families that receive the most relative to what they pay, it's actually low-income Canadians. And so I think that's precisely the last direction that we want to be moving in. But also that there's a very strong rationale for this, in that we are living within a climate emergency. And so this is not the time to be scaling back on our actions in that, because we can see the very real cost. Just over the last couple of years, look at what's happened this year in Atlantic Canada with Hurricane Fiona. Last year in my province of BC, the atmospheric rivers cost over $9 billion in damages. And so climate change is real, and we need to make sure that we're all playing our part in addressing it.
Reprise du débat.
Resuming debate.